Jonathan's coming aboard.
Pre-roll should go.
And I was on mute. My bad. Great way to start. Hi there. Welcome to the Zoom Test Kitchen. It is Friday, October 7th. We're so glad to have you here. Jeff is with us, but on assignment in his car. Hi, Jeff. It's good to see you here. Oh, Jeff can't unmute. Right. We set the meeting up, just so everyone knows, we set the meeting up because we're expecting a whole bunch of folks here, and we're thrilled about that. We set the meeting up so that you all can't unmute yourselves, but we will absolutely unmute you if you have a question that you want to ask or anything else like that. So we're going to jump in just a moment here. I'm really, really excited to see all of you. I'm going to spotlight myself. There we go. Really excited to see all of you here. We have two very special guests. Today is really, as much as it is an opportunity to ask questions, it's a celebration. Today's a celebration of the stable release of ZoomISO version 2. And we are so honored to have with us Andy and Jonathan from the Liminal team, from the Zoom team. They're here to answer our questions, to engage with us, talk with us. If you have more general Zoom questions, great. We love those too. Just hang on to them till the end of our opening session here with Andy and Jonathan. We're going to use up as much of their time as we possibly can before we let them go, and then we get to those other questions. We are streaming on YouTube, just so you all are aware, and we will be saving this video for future playback. We're really glad that you're here. If you do have questions, you can throw them into the chat. We have someone monitoring that chat, and we're looking forward to hearing your questions. So Andy and Jonathan, welcome, welcome, welcome. Really glad to see you here. I'm a noob amongst this group, and so I wanted to start just by asking, pre-version 2, version 1, What was the problem that you were trying to solve with ZoomISO and ZoomOSC?
Well, thanks again, David, for having us. It's a real pleasure to be here. And thank you, Jeff, as well, for the invitation and for hosting such an awesome group. It's great to be with everybody again today. And yeah, we are super excited to be sitting down and joining you. So yeah, rewinding back to really all the way back to 2020, this start of Liminal. This was the original problem that I think Jonathan and I wanted to solve, which was how to get really good remote caller solutions for production. And specifically, we were doing works of theater, academic performance, performance art, things like that. And a key piece of that is being able to customize the way that something looks and feels. But it's kind of hard to do that when all you're doing is, screen scraping a Zoom client and the videos are prearranged. And maybe you can, get really clever with spotlighting and controlling. At the time, we didn't have multi-pinning or things like that. We couldn't even rearrange the gallery view. And, if you think all the way back to then and where the Zoom was at that time. So originally we started with controllability, and that's where ZoomOSC came in. So ZoomOSC allowed us to start automating things that we would normally do as a host or a co-host, like I said, spotlighting and pinning and chatting and that kind of stuff. But always in the back of our minds, the thing we really wanted to do was kind of put the Zoom client aside and get the raw audio and video feeds. And it just took us a longer time to figure out exactly how we were going to do that. And we learned a lot of lessons making ZoomOSC that helped us understand the need for controllability and the ability to really be able to dig in and build not only the output system, but the workflows that surround it, right? Meanwhile, producers all over the world were building what we would call a pinning farm, right? Where they had laptops with maybe single displays or dual displays, and they were screen scraping them and using that as their way of getting in, their panel in for a broadcast show. But that has a relatively low, what we call endpoint density, right? How many people can you get per computer that you're deploying? So for a 16-person panel, you would need 8 or 16 laptops, depending on if you had an external display that you could then screen scrape them from. So we felt there had to be a better way. And we've been working in the SDK for a while, and eventually we came across how to do it. So in ZoomISO version 1, we had the ability to generate these pop-up windows that we could then capture from the macOS display API and output as NDI or Siphon. Of course, because it was a physical display, you could also output it to things like HDMI or DisplayPort, depending on, if you needed to then convert that into something else or capture it in a different way. So we were really excited about that. And we really saw a lot of happiness in the market that was surrounding that. But there were some definite limitations, around that solution. We didn't have the isolated audio. We had all these pop-up windows. It was a lot to manage. It didn't feel native. It didn't perform as well as we were hoping for from a CPU perspective. So immediately when we joined Zoom in December, we got to work right away on all the things that we knew that we couldn't do inside of the SDK, which is the tool set that we use to build our apps. We immediately began road mapping those items to be able to get them in there. So not only are we able to take advantage of them, but any developer can take the tools that we use to build ZoomISO and integrate them into their apps. So we got to work right away and we began working on our V2 media engine. And so I'm really excited to now be at a position where, having spent the past 9-10 months working every day on building this product, that we've not only been able to release it, but I've now heard the reaction back from the market about how excited you guys are about ZoomISO version 2. So again, really happy to be here, and I look forward to the conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. One of the first questions that is coming in, and this is actually a really fantastic question, is where did Liminal get its name from?
My fiance, Katie, is the actual answer, but I wanted to, Jonathan and I wanted a name for our company that focused on the idea of intersectionality, because that's a huge part of our background. I was a double major in computer science and drama. Jonathan has worked in both broadcast and theater. We have been doing a lot of technology versus art, on stage versus backstage, teleconferencing versus production, right? All of these things began to blend together into this idea of the intermediary or the liminal space between these disciplines. And so we named the company after that idea. And I think, eventually we found that name paid a lot of dividends because, we became part software company, part services company. Technology meets art, and production and events meet theater. All of these intersectional spaces kind of wrapped up really nicely into that name. So that's where the name Liminal comes from. And it's a brand that we continue to use at Zoom when we talk about pro production and these liminal apps.
Fantastic. So you mentioned a little bit about one of the differences that was really noticeable to me between version 1 and version 2, which is all the pop-up screens of the outputs from version 1 that we now don't necessarily have anymore. Can you tell us a little bit more about what version 2 brings to the table that version 1 couldn't do?
So the big one is raw data access, the ability to actually get the pixel buffers that are coming in to the Zoom client directly versus having to go through an intermediary framework to recapture them. So while ZoomISO version 1 wasn't truly a screen scrape, it was a little more low level than that. It shared a lot of similarities where the Zoom client would render their participant to the screen, and then we would have to recapture that pixel buffer. And then that's how we got the actual video frame, right? But there's a lot of steps in that pipeline that weren't as efficient as we had hoped. Now, it did work, but it wasn't, like you say, it required these pop-up windows. It required a lot more in order to be able to make it happen. It was the best we could do at the time. But now that we're part of Zoom, we can do so much more. And so this V2 media engine is built around 2 core ideas. The first is, like I just said, raw data access. We have the ability to go to Zoom and say, I want this person at this resolution, and Zoom will return to us a pixel buffer of that request. Basically, if Zoom can do it, we will get that video frame coming in. The second thing that we did is we looked at our optimized, what we call the scaling and conversion cycle. So we have this layer inside of ZoomISO that takes the incoming video feed and standardizes it to production outputs. So if you've used Zoom Rooms, for example, and you've looked at the NDI on those outputs, if the participant video feed changes from full HD to just HD, or maybe down to 360p, the NDI feed actually changes resolution as well. And that has some downstream implications for the decoder applications. For example, if you're writing a video file to disk, you don't have the luxury of being able to change what that video file is. So either the decoding program has to intelligently scale that, or most often what will happen is it will just segment the recording and start a new file. And there's other weird things like that begin to happen when you don't have this standardization layer between the incoming video feed and the outgoing production feed. So one of the things that ZoomISO does is it makes sure that when you set up a request for this person at this resolution and this frame rate, it will always deliver that. Now, Zoom might not be able to deliver that incoming video feed for a number of reasons: network conditions, computer conditions. There's all sorts of things that can happen. And Zoom takes a lot of care to optimize the experience for the low latency conversation. But again, that sometimes jives against the paradigms that we have in production, where that frame always needs to be that size and always needs to be on time. So what we do is we will scale the incoming video feed if necessary, and we will drop or repeat frames to hit the target timings that are requested inside of the app. So this standardization and compliance layer is something we spend a lot of time trying to optimize so that we can have really great performance. And the solution for us was to look into Apple Silicon. Apple Silicon provides a number of dedicated hardware accelerators on the chip that pair beautifully with the APIs that are available in macOS Monterey. And the combination of these technologies have allowed us to have a really incredible endpoint density. We can have upwards of 8 participants at full HD on the cheapest Mac Mini that you can buy, which really, from a price to performance standpoint, outshines, I think, a lot of other solutions on the platform, and even on other platforms as well. So a lot of care went into how that was crafted to allow us to do something that we really couldn't do anywhere else. So we're very, very excited about the new media engine.
Amazing. This may seem like a little bit of a obvious question, but Jonathan, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what has changed in both in your capacity, what you're able to do, and also in your approach to how you're getting it done since you all joined the Zoom team.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think both Andy and I can even answer this question differently. So from my perspective, I've gone to event services at Zoom, which is a very large team that we've talked about many times before, but we were able to do both internal events for Zoom and external events for customers. But I think what's been very important to have is to maintain the direct connection that I have with Andy to collaborate on development of these future features in ZoomISO, and to be able to directly take the needs of our internal team as well as external customers that I talk to and pass them on directly to Andy. So Andy and I meet multiple times a week, and our conversations are just full of things that we figured out and things we found and problems we have. And we're not just on the development side here. We are actively using these tools both internally and externally. And I think that's been very important. And while we did that with Liminal, and that's the entire basis, like he said, is that we had both a service and a technology company to it. While we did that with Liminal, it's very different with Zoom because we have a lot more resources to tap into. It's no longer just our small projects that we're working on. We have dozens of projects a month at scales that we would never have done under Liminal. Now we have all of that to pull in to our experience. So it's been very important to have that. And I know also with ZoomISO version 2 specifically, we're able to test it to a level that we weren't able to do with version 1. Even though version 1 was out for a long while, it didn't have the resources behind the initial development in order to test it as thoroughly as version 2 has been tested. I can say with confidence that over the past few months, multiple internal teams have been using version 2 very heavily to make sure that it is just a whole step above what version 1 was.
And I think for my part of it, we're doing a lot fewer workarounds and a lot more platform improvements. Like, as Liminal, when we could ask and we could say, hey, Zoom, can you fix it? Or can you make this feature? Or can it work this way? But, ultimately, we had to eventually find workarounds or alternative solutions or compromises because we didn't have at every point the things that we needed. But now that we're part of Zoom, we have the ability to advocate not only for ourselves, but for all developers in the platform. And I'm really proud that everything that we do in ZoomOSC and ZoomISO is based on our meeting SDK that any developer can pick up today and do the same things that we did in their app. So when you think about our journey, I think, this year has really been about upgrading our native tool sets to be able to provide more capability. And now I'm excited to see that now that we've done this example of what's possible, what will other developers do in this space, integrating into their apps or making new apps that, that use a lot of the same underlying technology, but that serve a need that developer thinks that they can fill. So I'm very excited about that.
Wonderful. We have a whole bunch of questions that are stacking up. And so what I'd like to do, Andy and Jonathan, and you tell me if this is okay, is we'll throw some questions out and hopefully that can lead to, if you want to do some demos or other things, if that works. Yeah. So here's a question that's coming in. By the way, you should all know that the reason this chat message is up on screen is because of Andy Carluccio and Jonathan. We're using ZoomOSC and Isadora here to bring these up. So props to them. So the question is, can you select participant audio as embedded audio over SDI? I know you can do embedded audio over NDI, but they're asking over SDI.
Yes, so it is possible to do embedded SDI audio with ZoomISO today. However, as the question asker probably realized, in the outputs menu, the drop down for embedded audio is grayed out. So the reason for this is that the way that the deck link presents audio to the system is through the audio drivers. We also have the ability to do it through the SDK, but that's going to require a sample rate conversion. So while we do intend to be able to do this, we would like to field test that more internally before we roll it out. But what would you do today if you needed to do this solution? In the advanced audio tab, you will see the ability to enumerate any multi-channel audio device that's available to the operating system. So if your only goal is to be able to embed all of it into a single SDI line, you just pick the deck link port, you'll see 16 channels, and then you can assign individual participant feeds on that single copper wire that can carry all 16 audio channels. Now, if you want to split it up so that you have individual audio feeds available to the different ports on your deck link through SDI, that's also possible. There's two ways to do that. The first way is through audio MIDI setup, where you can create what's called an aggregate audio device that bundles together several different audio devices into a new virtual audio device. You then tell ZoomISO to look at that virtual audio device, and you assign the participants to the corresponding channels in the aggregate audio device. The other way to do it that's a little more visual is if you already own the software loopback, you have a visual way of seeing all of the available outputs from the deck links. And then you can create what's called a pass-through device. Now, the pass-through device appears to the operating system just like any other multi-channel audio device, but you have the ability to route incoming channels of it to outputs. There's a great video from Ryan Summerfield that came out earlier this week where he breaks down that exact system. And so I'd encourage you to check that out to see how it's done. But it's absolutely possible today to embed isolated audio into your physical outputs. And by the way, that both of those solutions also work for embedding into HDMI if you have an HDMI based ATEM switcher, for example, and you want the isolated audio there. So it's absolutely possible to do because of the advanced audio workflow in ZoomISO. And we're taking a look at ways to make it even easier through that embedded drop down in the outputs page, but we want a little more time to test that.
Andy, you mentioned earlier that Zoom has a focus on just getting the video and audio to people and like not low barrier to entry. We want everyone to be able to communicate. Where does ZoomISO version 2 fit into the workflow for non-production folks? Is there a place for it in houses of worship, in classrooms, in schools, places like that?
Absolutely. And I look forward to brainstorming this one with Jonathan as well. But I can tell you off the bat some things that I've heard customers doing that are perhaps not conventional broadcast workflows, but are still powered by ZoomISO. One of them is the ability to just have a more customized multi-view of things that are inside of a Zoom call. So I want to put my meters up on this screen, and I want to put my host up on this screen, and I want the active speaker over here, and maybe I want a couple other color scopes or things like that on this side. And if you're in meetings where all of those different resources are available as individual participants, you could then pull those back out and just arrange them in your studio in a variety of different ways, again, through NDI or SDI or HDMI. So it can pull apart the Zoom meeting if there's different things you want to look at in different ways. We also see in the installation space the ability to do things that are more creative, like being able to have a bunch of televisions with different speakers on them on stage. Again, not necessarily like a broadcast contribution, but perhaps more of a hybrid or a digitally engaged physical event that allows you to bring the remote content into the physical space. And I think that has intersections with houses of worship. I think that has intersections in education. The way to be able to play with Zoom a little bit more and get the individual pieces of it so that you can put it back together in a more customized way. Again, I believe that production is actually just an expression of customization, and customization expresses itself in a variety of ways. Accessibility, it presents itself as branding, right? It presents itself as all sorts of different things that we see inside of Zoom. They all come back to the idea of customization, but they express themselves in different verticals as these different themes. So ultimately, I do think that these features can be used in other ways, although the interface and the workflow is optimized specifically for production or events-focused use cases.
Production is an expression of customization. That's sorry. I wanted to write that in the chat because that's really pretty profound. Very beautiful. I'm going to actually, Jonathan, did you want to chime in, or if not, I'm going to send it over to a question. But Jonathan, do you want to share anything?
Definitely chime in, especially on that production expression of customization, because as Andy knows, a substantial amount of the work that I do is customization on top of ZoomISO. So whether it's for Zoom's internal team, whether it's for a customer, what I'm doing is taking the ZoomISO, the fact that it is meant to be just a core engine, and then on top of that, you send the video to media servers or you control it using an OSC controller. On top of that, that's where the customization comes in. So bringing this back to the initial question, right? When it comes to how can you use ZoomISO in different applications in different industries, different use cases, it really comes down to what's your controller? What's your control interface for selecting those ZoomISO participants? And then the second part to that is, where are you sending those ISO participants? I mean, if you're sending them to a video mixer for broadcast contribution, you've got a great workflow there, but you can send it to an OBS instance that's running custom scripts. You could send it to Isadora that's doing some abstract dance or some expressive art. And that's something that Mark Caniglio has been doing a lot with his new EasyCast and being able to take advantage of that. It's not ZoomISO, but it's taking advantage of the same low latency video transport. But again, it comes down to that customization. It comes down to ZoomISO is just the engine. It's usable in itself, but at the end of the day, you layer on top of that the systems that you need.
Beautiful. I'm going to throw it over to Peter Sargent, who is going to help us out with some of the questions that we have in the chat. Peter?
Certainly. So the next question we have is it should be a simple question, but has probably a broader impact for those of us who like the high bandwidth stuff is how is the high bandwidth rollout coming out in Europe? And I'll add to everywhere else as well.
Absolutely. So we anticipate that rollout will reach the main population regions, Asia, North America, and EMEA by mid-October. Mid to late October is our current estimate for when the rollout will be completed. It's not something that like one day it's available everywhere. It's something that rolls out over several hours, over several days in different regions as a global infrastructure update. And for the benefit of those who might not be familiar with what high bandwidth mode is, it allows ZoomISO to have a 100 megabit per second link between the Zoom cloud and the Zoom client. This is notably different from how things like Zoom Rooms or the Zoom meeting client work, where that is a more constrained amount of bandwidth. So when you start to get past 6 1080p sources, you're going to need the additional bandwidth from the Zoom cloud in order to be able to export them at full HD with full frame rate that's available. So that additional bandwidth is really helpful for ZoomISO Pro, where you're able to extract theoretically an unlimited number of feeds, right? It then becomes not a limit from Zoom, but a limit on the hardware that the system the system that you've provided to the app and how it can take advantage of those resources. So again, I'm really excited to share that with you. I look forward to testing that out with all of you in the kitchen and in other places when high bandwidth mode is available. You'll hear from me as soon as I see it out in the wild. But we were really excited about it when we did our internal tests with it. And I think you're going to be just as excited.
Amazing. You mentioned in passing ZoomISO Pro. So let's talk for just a moment about the different versions of ZoomISO that there are. Tell us about the light version and the Pro version and what the differences are.
Yeah, so I'll even step a little wider back. What are the liminal apps at this point right now, and how are they priced and how are they distributed? So beginning at the free tier, you have ZoomOSC Essentials. This is the tool that I created to be able to do those works of theater, that I was doing at the beginning of the pandemic, and all the same commands that I had available at that time, as well as everything that was done between March of 2020 to December, January of 2021, and several additional features that have been added over the years have been added to ZoomOSC Essentials. It's a free entry point to the controllability of the Zoom platform. It's optimized for remote workflows, and it's our free entry point. So that's ZoomOSC Essentials. Next, at $19 a month is ZoomOSC Pro. ZoomOSC Pro adds things like multi-spotlighting, multi-pinning, other like things like breakout room controls and enhanced workflows that are designed for the event producer who's working on potentially a paid project and is taking advantage of the Zoom platform in an even deeper way. It enables a bi-directional link to things like the Stream Deck. And we have this whole BitFocus companion module that sits on top of that and has all this interactivity. So that's, again, sitting at $19 a month. That's down from $35 a month. At September, one of the announcements that we had is we significantly dropped the price of ZoomOSC Pro. Now getting into ZoomISO, in version 2, there are 2 versions, a light and a pro version. The light version is at $29 a month. That gives you 4 outputs to NDI, physical display, or siphon. And those outputs can have embedded audio, for example, in the NDI output, where you can support embedded isolated audio. That's available there. We have a brand new user interface and a participant management tab that allows you to search, filter, and apply actions to participants. That's available in the light version as well. And we think that this is a great entry point. When we looked at the data on how people were using ZoomISO version 1, we saw that there was a peak of people who were producing shows using NDI with panels of 4 people or fewer. And so we've offered a cheaper entry point to the platform that optimizes for that use case, where we saw a spike in the user base that we thought would be able to serve really well. And then
Andy, before you go on, I just want to real quick, Jeff has to drop out. He's got a gig. Jeff, do you want to just say hello, goodbye?
I will.
We're really glad that you popped in. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thanks to everybody for coming and supporting the community itself, but especially thanks to Andy and Jonathan, who have been huge supporters of the Zoom Test Kitchen for a long, long time. We used to have a test kitchen dedicated to their products when it was just super hyped. We didn't have enough time in an afternoon to do Zoom and OSC and ISO. So it's just been an amazing path to be a part of and see the growth and acquisition of all things. And it's just incredible. So, congratulations to to you guys. Thank you for what you're doing for all of us in the industry, and to everybody else. I know there's a lot of people who still, they're still on the platform of interest and learning versus grabbing that first Stream Deck, using that companion for the first time. And there's lots of ways to do it. That's my method is all. And just kind of digging in. I'd encourage you, man, just do it, because the moment you do, you'll never go back. I said early on, I said, I'll never manage another Zoom meeting with my mouse again. And it's just far too easy and powerful, and it just makes you look good and shine if you're doing freelance work or for your boss or whatnot. It just does incredible things. And, in the production space with the ZoomISO and so forth, it's just fascinating. I'm amazed at the end here. I'm amazed at how well Andy has tolerated the questions and comments about audio, isolated audio. It's been a long time coming, and it's thrilling to know that it's here and everything that it's taken to get here. So thanks, guys. Sorry I have to drop, but we do have to go finish this setup and broadcast this game tonight. So take care, and we'll see you guys next week.
Great to see you, Jeff. Thanks again for all the kind words. Really happy to be here.
You bet. Take care.
And thank you, Jeff, for creating this space for all of us. Sorry, I cut you off, Andy. I apologize for that. I'll let you finish.
The last SKU is ZoomISO Pro. This has an unlimited number of outputs. It supports physical output cards like the SDI options and the Blackmagic Desktop Video Suite. It also supports what we call advanced audio. Now, advanced audio is that system that allows us to talk to any multi-channel audio device on the operating system. And so that can be Dante virtual sound card, that can be Loopback, Blackhole, Soundflower, aggregate audio devices, as we discussed earlier, the enumerated outputs of physical displays. So advanced audio is another key feature that we introduced in ISO Pro. And because it can do more than 4 outputs, it also has the high bandwidth mode activation when that becomes available. And like I said, if there's any software updates that are required to enable high bandwidth mode, those will be provided to Pro customers in an upcoming update. And there's also, we're kind of waiting on the cloud infrastructure for that to happen, but it is coming. So.
Fantastic. And for those of us who were using version 1, there is a way to move over to version 2. You get the light version. I already have it set up here. I already got my license key. You get that for a full year. If you want the Pro version, you get that till January. So really generous offerings to allow us to make that transition over. Fantastic. I want to, how much per month? I tell you what, all that information is available on the website. If you head on over to liminalet.com, you can get all the details that Andy just shared, but definitely head over there and get all that information. I forgot to mention before, and I should have, if you want to just ask your question, raise your hand. You don't have to let us do all the talking, just put that hand up. But until we get some of those hands up, I'm going to send it back over to Peter because I know we have a bunch more questions.
So on the more technical side, how long is the buffering time of ISO to get to resequence the outputs, resync the outputs?
So thankfully, I would say, so it's less that we are resequencing the output, and it's more that we are allowing these threads to sample our incoming video buffer at the rate that they want to do their output. So I would think of it like this. You have what we might call like a novel frame rate, how many new frames are coming in, and those are delivered as fast as possible as Zoom comes in and we scale them up and we get them ready. We have this bucket of novel frames. You can kind of think of it like we put it, like a sheet of paper on the table, and then the output protocol picks up that piece of paper at a constant time. So it's resampling this at a constant rate, and we are just updating the available frame as fast as we can. So while you're, let's say you have a participant who's on a shaky Wi-Fi connection, right, and their frame rate is 25 frames a second. It's fluctuating 25, 27, 23. It's all over the place. The output library is sampling exactly 2997, but the number of new frames that are available in terms of the novelty of the pixel data is at whatever the frame rate that we're coming in as. So I would think of it less about like a resequencing kind of thing and more of a sampling of a data where we're just making a new pixel buffer available on the fastest cadence we can.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Hey, Andrew, how are you? You have a question for us. Go for it.
I do. You can hear me fine.
If I open my window, Andrew, I might be able to hear you. He's down there.
That's right. We live like 3/4 of a mile from each other. But after Andy moved, it was great. We got to have coffee. But anyway, I've got a couple of questions. The first is for the non-pro version of ISO, which doesn't have all the extra audio features. How do you like interface, whatever audio system you're using to that? Is it through NDI only, or is there other options?
I can chime in on this one. So it is through the embedded options only. You don't get the advanced audio tab, and that's something to indicate as well, is that when we designed the interface, we wanted to make sure that the advanced audio tab was number one, labeled advanced audio, so it's not the only audio, it's just the advanced audio. And it was a separate tab so that you don't have access to that if you're in the light version, but you don't have to worry about it if you don't have Pro. So under the main tab, the main outputs tab, you do have the ability to do embedded audio. We really think the perfect combination, especially for that light user, is to do 4 NDI feeds with embedded audio. Going into Wirecast, Mimo Live, vMix, whatever program you have for NDI, it'll take in that audio, keep that synced. Those will stay in step, and you have full control over that. So that's really the way we recommend. Andy answered the question previously about embedding in the SDI, but that's a different use case.
And you still have the ability to elect whether you want the embedded audio to be off, a mix of everybody in the meeting, or isolated to the participant that you've selected.
Great. Okay.
Yes. I will add to this one more thing as well, is you still do have the ability to use the speaker output within the Zoom interface if you did want to send to a loopback audio device or something like that. Just like you would in any Zoom device, it's the same thing there.
Great. Good to know. And then the other question I have is, so a lot of you know me as primarily an audio person, which is what I am. That is my wheelhouse. And NDI is very new for me. And I would put this question to you guys and anyone who is here on the meeting. How, if you were new to NDI, how would you learn it? What would be the best way to learn and even start to use it? I'd love to just have something at home where I could just play with it to get to know it better.
One thing I'll say, because you're here with a great group of people who can answer all sorts of different things about NDI, but specifically on the audio side, I just wanted to make you aware that there is a VST plugin for receiving NDI audio. And there's also a software-based console called Harrison Mixbus.
Oh, yeah. I know that one. Yeah, a little bit. I actually have it, but I haven't really leveraged it because
that could be a good entry point, because the audio console world, and this could be a stepping stone into NDI for you.
Great.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andrew. And again, if others have questions, please throw those up also, or raise your hand, and we'll get you in here also. Peter, do we have another question lined up?
Certainly. So the basic question, is there an upgrade path for Zoom Rooms?
Is there an upgrade path for Zoom Rooms? So the liminal apps are a separate suite from the Zoom Room stack. Now, earlier, it's funny. It's actually, it's one of the things I enjoy about this, because when I came on in June, the question was, is there an upgrade path from ISO to Rooms? And now the question is there a path from ISO back to the Rooms to the ISO? So it's kind of funny. Whenever we add features to one product, I think people get worried that we're getting rid of the other one, but no. So earlier in June, we added 12 NDI outputs to Zoom Rooms, 6 of which could be assigned to 1080p. Again, in reflection of that bandwidth cap differential between ISO and Room. So I think the way to think about it is that ZoomISO is the tip of the spear. It's where we're using the latest technology, the latest workflows. It's perhaps supported on the fewest number of systems, right? It's Mac OS only, Mac OS Monterey, optimized for Apple Silicon, right? So it's not a cross-platform solution like Rooms. But then the lessons from ZoomISO and ZoomISO's media engine then come back and apply to the Rooms product. And so that you see the expanded NDI integration that we had earlier this year. So there is not a direct conversion between the two. Zoom Rooms is $50 a month. So ISO is cheaper on the monthly basis than a Room. So there's not a conversion there. They solve different problems. Rooms is great for turning your computer into more of an appliance form factor thing with a dedicated separate controller, where ISO is a client form factor device, is a downloadable software application, does a little bit more than the Rooms do on the production space. But then again, Rooms is always intended to be sort of a hybrid teleconferencing appliance. So they serve different use cases. They overlap in the world of production, and particularly around NDI. And this year, you've seen huge upgrades to both of them this year. So I think you should feel good about both platforms.
We're getting Sorry, let me just jump in, Peter. We're getting a few different questions about the relationship between ZoomISO and ZoomOSC. I was wondering if you could just clarify, because OSC is built into ISO. So what do you get when you've got ZoomISO? Do you get the full OSC suite? How does that all work?
Yeah, so I would think about ZoomISO as a superset of ZoomOSC. So if you have the trial version of ZoomISO, that means you haven't put a license key into it. You have all of the free ZoomOSC commands available to you. When you put in a light license key, you get the additional output called the list output. And the list output is what is used for the bidirectional link to devices like the Stream Deck. So once you put in a light license into ZoomISO, you have all of the ZoomOSC free commands and the list output so we can work with the Stream Deck. When you go up to ZoomISO Pro, you have all of ZoomOSC Pro and all of the ZoomISO functionality in one single executable. So some people haven't realized this yet, but if you had separately been holding a ZoomOSC subscription at $35 a month and a ZoomISO version 1 license, you can now drop the OSC subscription and take the additional savings and apply that towards the ZoomISO V2 Pro. So you should be saving some money there, depending on how it all pans out, depending on what you had done in the past. Used to be that in ISO version 1, you had to separately license the OSC components from the ISO components. We've simplified it now. We've bundled it together. We feel like there's a real value play there, and we dropped the price of OSC. So you should be saving some money if you had these multiple licenses that you've been managing. We've now simplified the subscription model, which means that it's a lot easier just to execute a single app. You don't have to worry about port conflicts and stuff like that. It's a lot simpler to the end user.
Yeah, Mike is yelling fantastic in the chat, and I couldn't agree with him more. That really is outstanding. Robert, good to see you. You want to jump in with a question?
Yeah, Andy, really good to see you again. You're still full of energy as usual. Anyone who's watched Andy and being here knows his energy level is just unbelievable. Andy, you talked about isolating audio channels, and I know you know what I'm going to ask.
Yeah,
does that include isolating the interpreter's audio channel?
Not yet, and that's how I will say that. I definitely hear the use case on it. There is some cool stuff that's come out this year with interpretation and translation in that suite. ISO, we haven't. I don't believe the SDK enumerates yet the raw audio data for interpretation channels. So it's one of those things where we feel like we understand the use case. We got to get it into the platform first before we have the ability to add it to ISO. So it's one of those things where I don't want to do things that's not part of the development platform. So I want to upgrade the platform, then upgrade the app.
Understandable. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Robert. Lawrence, good to see you. You want to jump in with a question?
Yeah. Hi, David. Thank you very much for, Andy has probably seen a lot of my pings. I was one of the many who went on the journey with the V1, but a few months after the V2 came out, and I'm kind of stuck. I was kind of stuck with making up my mind about V2 Pro versus V2 Lite and OSC Pro. And now I'm hitting a little issue, which in fairness, we are discussing, but I just thought it's quite possible that Andy will have something to share, because we don't do the grandfathering thing where you buy one app and then you can use it forever. And I get that, and I love the subscription model now, but I want to have just the V1, the ZoomISO V2 Lite, and have ZoomOSC Pro. Okay. That's what my use case is, and that's I want it to work, but I'm hitting a lot of issues with Companion and the Stream Deck, where some of the controls work for ZoomISO and some don't. And so we're talking about it, and I don't think it's fair on you, but I'm bringing it so that perhaps your answer will be of use to others who are on the line just now.
Sure,
but you're doing doing a fantastic job, Andy. So,
thank you, Lawrence. I really appreciate
yeah.
that. And
Okay.
I think you're doing some really awesome stuff on your side as well. So obviously, like the stock solution that I would say is, well, if you use the Pro version, it's bundled in, you don't have to worry about 2 modules. But in your case, where you explicitly want to use 2 different instances of the software in the Lite version and then the OSC Pro version, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. Now, I know that you've looked at several of these, and I know that the support team is ongoing in their effort, but I'll recap, and apologies if you've heard some of this before, but maybe some of it's new. But here's how I think about it. So at this point, you have 2 different apps, and you're going to need them to bind to unique IP addresses and ports, both on the receive and sender side, because on the flip side, Companion has to bind to the inverse number and port. So you're going to need, like, by default, it's going to be local software loopback 127.0.0.1 on the IP address. The transmit port in ISO is going to be 9090, and the receive port is going to be 9090, and the transmit is going to be 1234. In Companion, you're going to do the flip. So I would then increment that to 9091 and 1235 or something like that. And then your second module would have the flip of that to listen on. So I assume that you've done that. So the next thing to start to think about is how many instances of the module you've set up. So you're going to want 2 different module instances. And one of the things that we don't know that I think the support team is trying to figure out is how the module instance could interact or conflict with each other, because this is something that's part of the Companion beta and the way that multiple modules are handled. So it's a little bit of a the Companion modules are in beta for the ISO v2 stuff, and I think I've asked our developers to take a look at how multiple modules interact with each other and if that could be related to any of the stuff that's going on. But at the basic level, you're going to want 2 instances of the module, 2 instances of the IP addresses and ports separated from each other so you don't have socket binding issues. And we'll do our part to continue to work with you to figure out if there's something else going on in the background between the different instances of the module. Companion is still in beta. Some of this stuff about memory management is in their code base versus ours, so they might need to solidify a little bit more of that before it settles down.
Great, thank you. And the Liminal support team is fantastic, so definitely reach out to them if you have any problems. Before I jump over to Victoria, real quick, I got an email from Zoom about mandatory minimum version. There's a question in here also. What's going to happen to ZoomISO version 1? I know you want all of us to move to V2, but are we going to be forced to move to V2, as we should be? Are we going to be forced to move there come November, the mandatory minimum version number?
Right. So I believe those of you who are both Liminal customers and have traditionally been Zoom customers as well should have received 2 emails at this point, one from the Liminal team and one from Zoom. So Zoom's email is talking about minimum version enforcement across the entire Zoom platform. So this is a Zoom-wide thing. The email should have gone out yesterday. Some of you might be getting it today in the second wave. And what this is saying that we have a quarterly lifecycle development policy. This is part of our security initiatives to keep you safe, keep your data secure, and keep your features up to date. So versions earlier than I think client level 5.8.6 and SDK version 5.7.6 or 5.9. So SDK 5.9, client version 5.8.6, and older are going to be retired. And so that means that the in your admin portal, the minimum version enforcement setting is going to get updated to that level. So that's going to happen platform wide. We then sent a separate communication saying, what does this mean if you are a Liminal customer? So, because you might not know what SDK versions the apps are based on. So ZoomOSC 4.0 and ZoomISO version 1 are built on SDK versions that are older than 5.9. So you will, come November 5th, you will find that they struggle to connect to most meetings because most people are going to have their minimum version stepped up to a version that's greater than the version that ships in those clients. So what do we do about that? So for ZoomOSC Essentials, it remains free for everybody. Just go grab the 4.1 update for ZoomOSC. You're good to go. If you're a ZoomOSC Pro customer, you can also, without any additional charge, download the latest update of that software and you're good to go. If you're a ZoomISO version 1 customer, that product is going to reach end of life on November 5th. It's had a good run, but it'll be end of life on November 5th. We offer multiple license conversion options. If you were a V1 holder at no charge to you, you can upgrade to ZoomISO V2 Lite and get an additional year out of that. So that way we guarantee that nobody who paid for ZoomISO version 1 has less than a year of a supported product that they can deploy and potentially have up to 2.5 years for their original purchase. V2 Lite is the successor to V1. V2 Pro is an upgrade. So we still want to make sure that you get some value back if you're, going to V2 Pro. So if you are, you get until January 1st, 2023 for that conversion. So just again, to recap, the V1 to V2 Lite conversion is till October 1st, 2023. That's a $360 value for a $249 purchase. We think that's pretty cool. And then on version 2, that's around $150 back again, but rather than amortizing the monthly subscription price, we give you free months. Notably, it doesn't automatically start billing you at the end of that cycle. You will have to then go ahead and sign up separately. We're not going to charge you at the end of that automatically. You'll have to make an informed, conscious decision that you are satisfied with your trial, and then that you would like to then sign up for V2 after the end of that. And we'll give email reminders to those of you who have done the converted license when the end of life date for that license key is coming up. But then we'll be on a subscription model.
Great information. Thank you so much. Victoria, good to see you here. Did you want to jump in with a question?
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. This product is very much a game changer for Zoom. I was using WebEx, and I used WebEx because of the HD documentation that was available in 2001. But I went to their highest level of technical support, and they were unable to get it to work with outboard sound cards, even in class compliant modes. And I had only a 65 to 70% success rate with my shows because of the audio dropouts and other problems with the audio. It seems that even though video requires so much more bandwidth, the fact that audio, when you do live audio, it's uncompressed. It's not an MP3. This is uncompressed audio. So this seems to cause an extreme amount of problems for streaming. Now, in 2005, I was the stage manager at NEAM, which is New Instruments for Musical Expression Conference at UBC. And we were doing telematic performance with Chris Chaffee's telematic software using Linux. Right. And I was the stage manager for that. So I've been doing streaming for a long time before any commercial application was available and before people with money even cared about this at all. So now it's really interesting to see what a lot of millions of dollars can do. It's quite thrilling for me. I started using Isadora in 2010. So I am very experienced in both these fields, and I really would like to see this continue. But I am an Intel Mac, so I won't be able to do this unless I invest substantially. So I will be applying for a grant to support my ongoing artistic development into this area. But right now I won't be able to use this. Is there any way that I can start to use this on my Monterey? Yes, but Intel also Mac.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So number one, that's awesome to hear how long you're thinking about telematic performance. That's really exciting to me to hear about, and I look forward to seeing what you do with this. So with ZoomOSC, the requirement is not present for Apple Silicon. So if you're looking to have Isadora command a Zoom client to do different behaviors, that would be available to you as a possible area to explore some of the interactivity that stems from that. That's actually where I started with as a theater maker myself. That's why
I've been following you on the forum. I just lurk on the forum, mostly, but I've been following this development with a lot of interest. Yeah. But you're still using RTMP, and Flash, as you know, is no longer supported. So I think that this whole technology is going to run into some issues in the near future. Suzanne Fuchs, a retired water wheel, which was a well-known performance space for artists in Australia. It was based out of Australia, but I did the 12-12-12 festival using her platform. And we had 4 streams of video and audio and live drawing in 2012. Yeah, so I've been doing this for a while, right? But you're gonna run into problems with that Flash support because Flash is no longer supported by Adobe.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then on the ISO side, I would mention to you that we allow you to dismiss the warning about Apple Silicon. And what we basically are telling you is that, yes, this is an unsupported configuration, but a lot of it will work. So you may find that what you need on the in the audio land, particularly, could be functional on that Intel Mac, but it's not something that our support team would be able to walk you through, like how to debug that, because it's not an officially supported configuration. But while you're waiting for the grant to come through, which I'm sure you will receive, because it sounds like you're thinking about a lot of really interesting things, and good luck with that, you can dismiss that warning and see what works for you. You might be able to get some value out of it yet. So something just to think about there.
And just as a reminder, at the convention at IBC, you were running ISO, as I remember it, on a base level Mac Mini. That's 8 gigs Mac Mini, which you can get refurbished for $550. So we're not talking about thousands of dollars. It's still money. I don't want to minimize $550. But the optimization that you've built, and maybe Jonathan, maybe you could even talk a little bit about this, the optimization that you've built into this, and the way that you're using the metal and the M1 architecture is just astounding what you're able to get out of it.
Yeah, we're really excited about the endpoint density and the price to participant, right? That's something to think about in a lot of different workflows, is like, how much does it cost for each contributor in total, right? And I did some interesting math with Jonas the other day about how it could even be cheaper to deploy ZoomISO in the cloud than Zoom Rooms, even though you require a 24-hour reservation. If your show is longer than 10 hours, it actually works out to be potentially substantially cheaper than a Zoom Room up there. So it's an important calculation to do and to think about that. But one of the advantages that ISO has is the endpoint density, which can help contribute to the cost to contributor.
And I can add some extra details and context as well about performance on the Mac Mini, which again, we use that all the time. So the M1 Mac Minis work very well. Their thermals are very good as well. So running 8 outputs continuously for long periods of time, you won't see those systems heat up, which is very good. They're also a great form factor for rack mounting. So whether you get, for example, one of the Sonatec X-Mac rack enclosures, those work very well with the Mac Minis and allow you to have a Thunderbolt card, such as a deck link, in addition to the Mac mounted in a 1U chassis. So those are something we use quite often. And that's why we are really drawn to that Mac form factor. We've been testing on M2 systems, and they work well, as to be expected, just as the M1 do. Obviously, if you're running on a laptop, you have cooling to keep in mind, because the system does run hot if it's running for long periods of time. The other thing to note about the Mac Minis is that we will oftentimes run additional programs alongside of ZoomISO. Now, officially, I won't recommend running your video mixer, your Wirecast on the same computer that you're running your ZoomISO machine. But if you keep your outputs low enough, it is possible for you to run those both on the same machine.
Thank you so much. Peter, do we have another question lined up? Oh, Peter is not with us. All right, he is with us. I'm gonna ask a question.
No, I've got it. I had to turn my mic on.
Sorry about that. Go for it.
The question really comes with the advent of, looks like the next version of the Mac operating system is about to exit beta. Where are we with ZoomISO version 2 and ZoomOSC in that space?
So I've been running the macOS Ventura developer beta, and I've tried both programs on it. I've run it through a test suite. Obviously, I think we need to see what Apple does with the release version before I can say for sure. So what goes to you is not always what goes to us, the developers. So I don't want to speak out of line yet. So let's wait for Apple to officially support it. But what I'm seeing internally, everything is working fine. So,
and I will say, you're accepting bug reports for those of us who are also running Ventura with ZoomOSC. So. Yeah, because I know I've submitted at least 2.
We chuckle internally, where it's like, the internal system is like, we don't know what version of macOS this is. I'm like, that's because it's higher than the maximum version in the data table. So, our CRM had a good time with that. Yeah,
amazing. Let me swing back over to Andrew.
Oh, I'm trying to lower my hand here, but yeah, I'm very interested in maybe some of your customers who will be using this as backhaul. For example, the backhaul solution with Zoom was you'd have a bunch of Zoom rooms to get your audio and video for different participants and bring that into a central facility and switch the show and then send it back out again, right? And then you could have a lot of interactivity and all that. But with and I know it's a new product, so I don't know if a lot of your customers or some of your customers are using it already for that. But now with the advent of isolated audio, it really does open up a tremendous amount of opportunity for that. And I would love it if this is a question and a request. So the request is also that maybe you could break down some of these systems that your customers allow you to, to share with the larger community, because it really does open up a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, I think, Jonathan, it would be great to get some of your perspective on this because he's out in the field every day dealing with these types of builds. I can tell you off the bat that at our booth at IBC, we showed off Dante Virtual Sound Card going into X32 with the Next Touch controller. We also showed embedded audio traveling through the NDI feeds and being mixed inside of vMix with a Universe control interface with an iPad that you could slide all the faders up and down. So we showed off a bunch of different things there, but Jonathan, maybe you have some additional thoughts on what isolated audio means for like topologies for production.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dante is what we're really excited about. Yes, there's many different audio devices you can use this with, but Dante just immediately opens up a whole world of possibilities and processing and easy to use networking, especially when combined with NDI for video. You have a killer combination, a lot less wires you have to run. So ISO audio is still something that we internally are exploring and experimenting with. We haven't fully adapted it into our workflows just because of the research we need to do into figuring out exactly how do you mix the audio for a panelist show in a very simple and efficient way. I think it's kind of fun to note that as important as isolated audio is, at the same time, you do need to have a dedicated operator managing that. And it's not an end all be all, right? Because it is something that the built-in Zoom auto mixing is actually pretty good compared to many other video platforms out there. And so for most use cases on the smaller scale, just using the built-in Zoom audio works for most cases. But when you start to unlock those ISO audio, the possibilities, we've still just begun to explore them. I know that I'm excited to be tossing it through Dugan auto mixers and through various processing to take the audio and based on the levels of the audio, then switch the video, for example. So a lot of exciting processing you can do that. We've brought it into Isadora. We've messed around with that. We brought it into an X32 at IBC and other events. So definitely lots more to see. And we would love to hear from you guys as you experiment, as you explore new things, what's working, what's not.
Oh, and to that point, I just did a show where, I had a Yamaha console with Dugan auto mixing and we were doing Zoom as well. And I did actually have to turn off Dugan for that particular instance because it was fighting the Zoom, and the Zoom was just fine. And we wanted Zoom to work because we wanted their face to pop up when they start speaking. So it was the right tool at that point, and the audio was fine. I think it had more to do with the mic they were using. I think they were using their laptop mic, and those two systems didn't like that and competed with each other. But it worked just fine once we turned off Dugan.
Quick question about the ISO audio that's coming out that I just thought of looking at some of the other comments and questions that are coming in. Zoom in the latest client update, we now have original audio for musicians. And I actually right now have a thing up at the top of my Zoom client that says, hey, are you a musician? Do you want to turn on audio original or something like that? I'm not sure how it knows that, but it's asking me that. The ISO audio that we're getting out of ZoomISO, is that post Zoom processing? Is that pre-Zoom processing?
So a couple of notes on that. So it respects remember the contributor determines the original sound state, not the receiver. So if you're sending original sound, ISO is receiving original sound. Now, notably different is if you are sending in stereo, ISO is receiving in mono. And that's because the Zoom client will send both the stereo and the mono mix up, and we subscribe to the mono mix. So notably, you won't receive stereo audio. Like we don't have like a pan in the UI where you can pick which channel is coming in. It's just the mono channels for participants. So that's the only thing that if you set that up on the sender side, you don't get that on the receiver side. But if you enable original sound, it's not like we start to add noise reduction and cancellation on the receive end. That's all done at your point where the audio is captured and transmitted. So we don't touch any of that.
Fantastic. I want to just do a quick time check with you, Andy. We're at the top of the hour. Are you good to keep going? Jonathan, are you good, or do you need to jump out? You're good.
I could probably do
I'm good,
another,
yes.
yeah, a little bit, yeah.
All right. You just cut us off whenever. Peter, let's go to another question if you have one.
Certainly. So here's the basic one. I think you just touched on it, but I just want to make sure we have the right answers. Jonathan, you mentioned that ZoomISO having an audio mixing engine within it. Is it using the Dugan algorithm or something different?
Yeah, so again, just to clarify on this, ZoomISO does not have an additional algorithm built into it. What we're referring to is the regular Zoom mixing algorithm that's in a regular Zoom meeting. So the one that you're hearing right now, if multiple people are speaking at the same time in a Zoom meeting, there's some auto balancing and there's some ways that that's presented to you, including things like automatic echo cancellation and other mix minuses of your own voice, things like that, right? So that can be accessed to the mix audio in ZoomISO, just like it would be in Zoom in the regular meeting. It is not Dugan Auto Mixer, it's proprietary.
Okay, and then coupled with that, here's a slightly different version. Is the X32 rack mixer with Dante card a good match for ZoomISO?
We think so, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so the Midas core might also be interesting because it doesn't have all the analog IO. It just has the Dante. So if you're only using it for ISO, that might be more effective. But I mean, the X32 is extremely popular console. The Dante card is an extremely popular add-on, and that's what we had played with. So I definitely recommend it for that because it's something that that's what we focus on. But there are other solutions that may prove to be more cost effective, but that's a good one.
Can you talk to us for a moment about, and this is a question from the chat here, about username, target, Zoom ID, gallery position, the different ways that you can use these indicators to leverage the power of ZoomISO and ZoomOSC?
Yeah, so these are what we call the target types. And the target types are the ways in which we identify a participant through the OSC protocol. So one of the ideas that I had when I originally created ZoomOSC was that, well, geez, sometimes I want to interact with the person because I know their username, but other times I don't know who they are going to be, and I need to be able to still interact with them in a person-specific way, but I only know where they're going to be in the gallery view, or I only know right before the show, and I want to fill out a file of all the names, and then I want to load that in, and those are going to be my people. So these target types are designed to be interchangeable ways of referencing an individual. So you have, like you enumerated here, you have their username, you have their gallery index, you have their gallery position, you have their target ID, which is this customized number that you can assign to the participants. And all of them are designed to support the various use cases at the API level without the developer having to deal with the conversion between different formats on their side. So it lowers complexity for the integrations, and it makes it a lot easier to reference people based on what you know. If you can come to us with one piece of information about the person, we can handle the rest. So if you're more of a gallery-based workflow, or if you care about who the person is versus just where they are, these target types create a variety of solutions to let you interact with them.
And I've actually found in my own use cases that there are times when I'm going to want to use the gallery picker, and there are other times when I'm going to want to use the list picker. If people are raising their hands, for example, like David just did, or is that Mike? Sorry. Like Mike just did, that changes the gallery, which means that changes the arrangement of or how ZoomISO is going to identify those folks. So there are different use cases for those different target pickers. Mike, how you doing? You have a question for us?
Good. Yes. And I put Mike. I'm getting in the habit of using the office hours full name. I go by Muddy most of the time, so you may recognize me as Muddy. So I love the different ways of being able to interact, as we were talking about. This is kind of an add-on to this discussion, being able to use gallery view, index, name. The one aspect I haven't seen yet, and I wonder if this is possible, is the participant list order, right? And specifically, when someone comes off mute in a 300-person meeting, I would love to see them on the top of my radar screen as the Zoom operator, rather than having to scan through multiple pages of participants to see the red icon, with feedback on the stream deck, right? So to help in those cases when we are allowing people to unmute themselves, but if someone is unmuted, we want to know that, quickly in case that's accidental or we need to mute them. So I know the participant list order is a kind of complex way that it's structured, but I'm curious if there's any thought about having that be a possible way to identify people.
Yeah, matter of fact, it's a great opportunity for me to show you something in ZoomISO that I think you'll find very interesting. So I've just jumped into a screen share here, and I'm going to go over to the participant management tab, where I can see a list of all the people who are in this meeting. And in your use case, you say, well, okay, well, sometimes, maybe I want to see if I'm looking for myself in this list, I can start to type in a name and it filters down to just that information. But I think you're going to be really excited when I click this box. I can now see only the people who are unmuted, and they show up right in this list. So as people unmute their microphone and mute their microphone back, this filter applies to that. It makes it much easier to identify them. Now, your point stands for things like the Stream Deck and other integrations where you want to be working in that area. But we definitely think about this problem because this interface is designed specifically for the need of being able to quickly find the person we're looking for. So I can filter by who's got co-host. I can filter by who's a panelist in a webinar. I can see who has video and audio unmuted, right? I can tick those individually, or I can see who's got their hand raised. So there you go. There's Andre, right? So, and I can still, even with the filters applied, I can apply additional filters on top of that. And I can narrow in on the participants. So we really thought about that problem of, how do you handle a ton of people in a meeting and find the person that you want to see. So that's something that we were really excited to introduce in version 2.
And this allows, so in this ZoomISO participant dialogue, that is an easy way for me to identify them and ISO them, but it doesn't allow me to mute them. Right from that.
So how does this expand out into other things? I think that's an area where we're interested in seeing, following that paradigm. How do we do more things with that? Something we see a lot with our custom Isadora interfaces. People will build out similar behavior where they can select and group people and apply actions to the group and all that stuff. And you've seen a bunch of group related functionality come into the companion, but the idea of bringing it all together now, I think you can see the beginnings of where we're going with it. And I think more to come for sure.
And I've heard, I'll just be the last comment, I've heard you talk about and look forward to learning Isadora enough to know that using that like group of people, because we don't have this intermediate permission level of panelist or moderator or speaker or moderator where we allow some people to come off mute, but having that list in Isadora and say, if this person is not on that list, then mute them right away if they come off mute. So as my Isadora skill level increases, I look forward to implementing that. But yeah, this is awesome. Thanks.
Good to see you, buddy.
Jonathan, since we mentioned Isadora, could you talk a little, because I've seen some of the Isadora builds you've done. Oh my Lord. Can you talk a little bit about how Isadora interfaces with ISO and OSC?
Yeah, definitely. I can speak about that. And yeah, I mean, Isadora can get super, super complicated. I want to make sure I give full credit to Andy as well for building out many of the core foundational elements in the Isadora projects that we distribute and that we use. So Isadora, right, we've tossed that around many times, and fundamentally it's a program that is designed to be a media server. It's a very old media server, so it's designed to do video processing and generative effects. But what makes it so unique for us is that it's based on data. It's based on taking in multiple types of data, modifying, transforming, applying whatever actions or processes you can think of, and then spitting it out. And so because of this, it becomes the perfect data playground in a visual node-based system, as opposed to having to learn scripting and coding. So there are many tutorials out there for how to get OSC in and out of Isadora. And there's even tutorials on the Liminal website and Liminal channel for how to get ZoomOSC specifically connected to Isadora. But essentially what you're doing is you are listening for OSC commands. So let's say, for example, I wanted to have an Isadora project that displays a chat message on screen. I'm listening for the command of the chat message being sent. I'm then taking the data of the username of who said that chat as one channel. I'm taking the information about the chat itself, and I'm then routing that through whatever process I want, rendering that as text, and then setting it to fade in or pop in or somehow come into my video feeds, right? But it all starts with the OSC messages coming in as listening channels. I also have the ability to send a message, and I can send whatever types of data I seem necessary. So this is how you would pin somebody, spotlight somebody, perform an OSC action or command, is by constructing that within Isadora. And again, one of the reasons why we talk about it a lot is because besides being a data playground, it is the only OSC application that I know of that fully supports everything ZoomOSC does at the max level. Every data type, every type of command, all the inputs, the ways of processing the inputs, it's extremely robust in what's possible. So highly encourage everyone to check it out. That's why we talk about it so much, and why we use it internally to build a lot of our interfaces and development.
Amazing. Thank you. So I want to highlight this question. Will there be any native way to capture chat questions from Zoom to use as lower thirds? So I'm going to let them answer this, but before they do,
somebody.
if only someone, I just want to show you all what Andy built for me, so you can get a sense of how I'm doing this. So this is, let me pull out that graphic. Oh, I can't pull out the graphic there. So this is using Isadora and using ZoomOSC. All of the hard work is hidden behind here. So all you're seeing is the interface that Andy created for dummies like me. But basically any chat messages, so I've joined this meeting from the Zoom OSC client. Any chat messages that come in are populated here. I can then accept them, and then make graphic, and then graphic in. And it will come up on the screen, and you can change the colors of the background and the text and all that other good stuff. But I do think that the question that was asked is really about, is there a way, I mean, this is a big workaround that I never could have done on my own. Andy, do you imagine a time when using ISO or OSC that we will have access to natively to bring, to get those chat messages in and out?
Yeah, I can't speak too much about like future plans, but what I can say is that you've seen the workflow, you see the capability and the value that adds, and I can tell you that Jonathan spends a good part of his day doing very similar things. We're always looking to make things like that easier to use. So something we think a lot about is interactive graphics, interactive displays like what we've shown here, and how to make those processes increasingly simple. So keep your eyes and ears peeled. And if you haven't already, make sure you're registered to check out Zoomtopia.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Can you talk for just a moment about a little bit about where is graphics production? I mean, because Zoom now has you and Jonathan and Liminal, and it's clear that they're making I don't want to say they're making a play. It's clear to me that they are putting an emphasis on production. But we also know that Zoom at its core is about just connecting regular folks to one another. Where do you see the production piece, the work that you're doing on Zoom's roadmap? How important is that to Zoom's core mission?
So Zoom is a platform company. Fundamentally, we deal with a variety of things. Meeting is a huge part of that for sure. But you have webinar, events, contact center, Zoom IQ for sales. You have a wide variety of different pieces of that platform. Jonathan, I apologize. I got to take that call. I'm going to pass this one over to you, and I'll hopefully be back in a few minutes.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, like Andy said, platform company, the idea is that Zoom is transcending to more than just what we were known as, which is just video conferencing, but there's so much more than that. There's the Zoom team chat and so on, Zoom events, right? So building upon that idea, we've been able to find ourselves quite at home within Zoom because there's a lot of support and intention towards supporting every industry. It's not, we're not constantly getting to these conversations where the topic is on prioritizing certain industries over others. The answer that we always get from those higher than us is every industry. They want to approach this from the most wholesome way possible. And so that's addressed not just through specifically targeting the broadcast industry and the events industry, because those are, of course, very big customers. It even trickles down to the individual creators, individual content creators, and what they're doing on the Zoom platform. And then, of course, it also transcends up all the way to the highest level, massive events, things like Zoomtopia, which are foundationally built upon ZoomISO, ZoomOSC, and these production tools as something that we use ourselves and encourage others to use as well.
Fantastic. Peter, there's a question here about Zoomtopia. I don't know if Jonathan is going to be tight-lipped about this, but you want to go ahead and ask him?
Certainly. What can we expect at Zoomtopia, will there be any behind the scenes access either in person or virtually?
Yeah, so there'll definitely be some coverage and some sharing about how we put together Zoomtopia, because I won't spoil the surprise, but we have a very, very large deployment of OSC and ISO for Zoomtopia. So this is a much larger Zoomtopia than previous years. It is taking place hybrid. It's a fully hybrid event between San Jose Convention Center. Tickets just went on sale, and the virtual component to it. So we're really pulling out all of our stops. Hundreds of production staff involved just to produce this event. So in terms of coverage, in terms of that, we don't have any details to release yet. We typically do post-event recaps, appearances, and discussions about how it was produced. But I want to specifically ask you guys, what do you want to see from how we did this? I've talked it up. I've said this is the most expansive showcase and use case of ZoomISO and ZoomOSC with multiple production tools. What things are you specifically wanting us to show?
Sky, go for it.
He has to be loud off mute.
Oh gosh, he can't mute. Yes. So sorry.
I've just been like many others here. It's been a joy to watch the evolution of this experience over the last 2 years. I, however, was most educated in looking at some templates or examples, because otherwise I feel like Far Side cartoon, blah, 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 Ginger, blah, blah, blah. And so consequently, I see Tamara shaking her head and Hasmuk as well. And while we are from the old copper days and big 35-foot production trucks, basically what I'm understanding is you're doing the same thing, but with the new IP protocols and technologies. And not that I don't want to learn, I just need maybe some translations, and even having David show this simple template, it's like, oh, that's what we're doing here. So that's my ISO for Dummies request.
It would actually be, it'd be really interesting to not just be able to see the behind the scenes, but to have some how-tos on how the behind the scenes work. That would actually be fascinating.
Right.
That would be amazing. Andrew, go ahead.
I think actually Andre was first, so I'll give it to him.
Oh, apologies. I didn't see you, Andre.
Oh, did he go away?
I think he went away. I think we may have lost him. I'm sorry.
I'll
and then we'll get Chris up also.
Yeah, great. Chris in the dark there. Two things. One is I want to piggyback off what Sky said too, which is that I could spend a lot of time, for example, learning Isadora. I'm not, because I need to spend time doing other stuff related to work and production. What is great though about what Sky said is that if you show that it's capable of doing this, and we have, and then I can go to my client and say, it can do this. We just have to hire this guy to program it or whatever, or find this person to program it. Those sort of thing are really useful. Like for a perfect example is the lower thirds that you just showed. That bringing that in, that was a really great use case. So I love that. That's one. Two is that to me, there's sort of, in the world I work in, it's a lot of corporate events. And these corporate events are either one-offs, like you go in, you set up, you do a bunch of setup, you might have some rehearsals if you're lucky, and you do your event, right? It's that kind of thing, and it can be anywhere from 1 day to 2 weeks, of whatever that is, right? And I've seen a lot of Zoom used in that and leveraged for that, and that's great. And you go in every day and you test it before you get on air or get into your show, just to make sure it works. Great. The one area that I would be very curious about is for the enterprise. And what I mean by that is these are companies, they have campuses. Maybe they've been using Zoom rooms because that is a stable product. It's a proven stable product. So my curiosity around all of this would be, with the newer developments that you guys have now, is how stable are they? And they need to be stable in this way. They need to be stable that if they don't get used for 6 months, but they've been left running in the background and you walk in to use them, they will work. Nothing has crashed or failed in the background.
That's a really good insight and a good question on that. Like I said before, version 2 is starting at a point that is much more stable than version 1.
Right.
As we've talked about the different engines between them, having access to that raw data is tremendously more efficient and more reliable than any of the methods used for ZoomISO version 1. So I'm very happy that the stability is just much better on that aspect. Now, naturally, we haven't tested this for 6 months continuous.
Sure.
We've done some 24-hour tests. We've done some week tests off and on, not continuous, not unattended. But that is something that specifically falls under my responsibility to test it at that level and to make sure that we feel comfortable pitching to those enterprise clients for that as well. So the good news is that we are seeing a lot of good interest and a lot of successful deployments for nonstop use. There are a few customers which are deploying this continuously in their broadcast setups, version 2 specifically, and it has been showing great promise for that. So going back to the architecture of ZoomISO and the design of the application, as we've said many times before, fundamentally ISO is the engine. It's designed to be sitting on a Mac on a rack somewhere, and then the control interface can be externalized, and that control interface gives you all of the mixing, routing, whatever you need to do to control it. And that is something that allows you to maintain a higher density as well, because you could have one control interface controlling multiple Macs on a rack. And that really gets to the core of the features that some of these enterprise customers need. And keep an eye out for Zoomtopia, because a lot of the things that we are demoing at Zoomtopia, and particularly the some of the production tools, we are showcasing hybrid events at a level that really hasn't been done before. At least not in a consistent way. Zoomtopia has many sessions, and all of them are being done, not all of them, but most of them are being done in a hybrid capacity, and that's something we are supporting. So keep an eye out for Zoomtopia for the production tools we use, and if you're interested in any of the production tools that we use at Zoomtopia, we are open to discussions about service contracts and distribution afterwards.
Thanks, Jonathan.
And I know that Jeff will be our man on the ground over at Zoomtopia. He's actually going to be there in person, which is pretty fantastic also. Mr. Fenwick, how are you?
I'm doing great. Hey, Jonathan, first of all, thanks for doing this. And I know Andy had to step out, but, and I apologize. I came in late. I saw you guys talking about graphic templates and the bit that David showed us. Have you considered, and I realize that, ZoomISO runs on a Mac. Have you considered trying to integrate or capitalize on some of the graphical, and if I'm off base, just say, yeah, let's move on. Fenwick doesn't know what he's talking about. But have you ever considered capitalizing on some of the graphical tools that already exist, as opposed to trying to reinvent from the ground up? For example, since ZoomISO is on a Mac anyway, for $50, you get a copy of Apple Motion, which has an extremely robust, very deep community of people that are making thousands of graphical templates. And if there was a way to integrate any of that, even if you didn't want to edit, even if you didn't want to buy Final Cut Pro, there's a huge tool already available there, which would be really interesting. And I've never seen anybody try and do it. And the architecture may not be there, and in which case, but then there's also certainly much more expensive. There's the whole MoGert, I think they call it, architecture in the Premiere world, where they too have a way that you can take a template and move it between systems. It's just an interesting idea, as opposed to building something from scratch.
Yeah, all good thoughts for sure. I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's, I guess, two challenges to solve with graphics. There's the data getting out from Zoom, just in general, whether that's chat, whether that's somebody raising a hand, whether that's, the floating reactions from a webinar. Those data out from Zoom to whatever graphics processor you're using to generate those graphics. And then the second challenge, of course, is how do you get it back into your final destination? How do you overlay that onto your Zoom feed? For many cases, we're spitting it back into Zoom. You can use whatever virtual video device you need to overlay that, but that is a second challenge. I won't speak to any roadmap items, but this is something we are exploring and looking forward to tackle. And you're right that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're not trying to find a solution that ignores all the solutions that already exist. So once again, stay tuned for Zoomtopia, because I think you'll find that we do some very interesting things with graphics. And once you learn about how we accomplish these graphics, we have about a half dozen different methods of rendering graphics from Zoom data. And each one has its strengths and weaknesses. And I think we'll have some great conversations after that.
I'm curious if there's a class that you have to take when you're onboarded at Zoom about how to answer questions about roadmaps, because you all are exceptional at avoiding those questions. You're just fantastic. Peter, do we have another question we can throw Jonathan's way?
User role _ breakout room _ moderator.
Sorry, we missed the beginning of that. It was, can you define the user role? So and then the string is user role _ breakout room _ mode moderator.
Moderator.
Yeah, I don't think I can answer that. Andy might have a better answer for that, but is that a response that you receive through an OSC command when you do the OSC role, or is that something from the SDK level? But I don't think I have a good answer for that.
All right, Grant, if you want to jump in here and clarify, that would be fantastic.
From the documentation, yeah, I can't answer that question. Reach out to Andy. He can probably give you some more insight on that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I don't want us to leave without saying goodbye to Andy, but it seems like he's busy. Oh, all right, we got another one from Muddy, and then I think Jonathan, maybe we'll let you go, and then we'll jump into some of the other Zoom questions we might have. Muddy, go for it.
I saw some questions around the behind the scenes view. Last year, I remember two aspects. I remember there being a behind the scenes channel that you could watch the production team and hear the production team as they were calling the show and cutting the show, which was super cool. But then an even better learning opportunity was a few weeks after the event. That team came back together and gave a little workshop, gave a little presentation, walking through the tools and kind of teaching, hey, here's what we did there, here's what we did, and had, I think, some Q&A involved around that as well. So I know there were folks asking about it, and as we're talking about Zoomtopia, do you know if those opportunities are something that we'll be able to see again this year? Because it sounds like there's some even better stuff planned for this year.
Yeah, well, I can say that I can't speak to anything concurrently and during the Zoomtopia sessions, but I can say afterwards we will be appearing on webinars, having a series based on how we did it. And our effort this year is to split that out into a series so that we can dive into more detail on specific topics and not smash it all into one webinar that only is able to address the high level. So we do want to dive into more detailed specifics. Like I said, there's many different solutions in play at Zoomtopia, and it is a very large hybrid event. And so it's important that we make sure that we give appropriate attention to all the different parts of it. So there'll be a lot of content afterwards. Stay tuned in case we were able to do anything during the session, during the Zoom event. We'll be able to let you know on that. But at the moment, the majority of our content is planned afterwards.
Thank you so much. Jonathan, I want to be just conscious of your time. You've been so generous with your time, and I'll say the same thing to Andy if he's able to come back. But maybe we can just jump into some generic Zoom Test Kitchen questions. If anyone has things they want to test out, questions, problems, struggles, we'd love for you to stick around. You are certainly the smartest of the bunch, but certainly also respect your time and understand if you have to jump off. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for being here.
Yeah, sounds good. I think I will hop off, get to some other tasks for today. Really hard at work preparing for Zoomtopia. You've heard me say that time and time again, but I think this really is, hope you guys can see that a lot of the timing is coming together for this reason. So Zoomtopia is a big deal here at Zoom, obviously. It's our biggest event of the year, but it's something that everything from the launch of ZoomISO version 2 to the way we're talking about things and the types of tools we're building are all focused towards that point. So I look forward to talking to you guys again.
You're like the lead speechwriter right before the State of the Union, in the weeks leading up to the State of the Union. Just so grateful to you and your time. And if Andy isn't able to come back, please do share our appreciation with him also. And for those of you who are watching, please go over to liminalet.com, grab ZoomISO, grab ZoomOSC, try them out. They've changed the way that I do what I do. It's just fantastic. All right, so let's just kind of open it up and see what people have going on in their Zoom worlds, what's working, what isn't working. Robert, it looks like you're clapping. That's not a hand up. You're applauding me. No, you're not. You're applauding Jonathan. I know. So what's on people's minds today when it comes to Zoom? I will say that just one thing, I was surprised. I made a little quip before about that little thing that I had at the top saying, hey, do you want to turn on musician mode? I saw that when I was playing guitar, and I was surprised that it seems, unless that was just something that I should have dismissed that I didn't, that it heard music and said, do you want to be in original audio? I don't know. Jonas.
It's a similar thing that we've seen with Teams for years, and Zoom probably uses the same thing. It does actually detect music, because one of the things that we've learned and Teams learned a long time ago, what they realized is people are just like, hey, I want to share a song with you. Let me hold my phone close to the microphone, and nothing comes out, and everyone is irritated because you locally hear it and nobody else hears it. So that pop-up in Teams works like that, and 90% sure it works like that in Zoom as well. So that's part of the rolling out of original audio for you gotta need to know on a need-to-know basis to, hey, you might want to like activate this mode so you no longer blame us for messing up your audio mode.
Copy that. That makes sense. Go ahead. By the way, I turned off. You can all unmute yourselves now, so you don't need to worry about that anymore. Go ahead. Hey, Andrew.
We can speak freely. Hey, I just wanted to make an offer actually to this group. I haven't really sat on this panel very much in the last year, but it's great to see it's so vibrant. There's a little bit of a push in the background right now for office hours to do a second hour on Dante. I actually think there should be a lab on Dante because it gets so much attention. And I would put that out to this community too, if you want to have some basic Dante training. The good news about your community that I think is different is that a lot of you are really good with networking, and that's the key to Dante. You know, it's like if you know networking, Dante is not a heavy lift. But there are all sorts of sort of traps and pitfalls, and I have fallen into all of them. And it's the way I've learned Dante, because I am certified in level 1 and 2, but that still has not made me fall down some big staircases with Dante. But I'm happy to share what I know. And I think my guess is if you wanted to do more of a thing around it, we could probably drag some other people over from office hours as well. So just putting that out there.
Fantastic. Amazing. And this is, if you're going to fall down those holes, if you're going to trip and stumble over things, this is the place to do it. That's why the Zoom Task is just here to help us, fail and fail fast.
Yes.
Fail well. Yeah. So
is there any logic or possibility of, just like they've set up for actually ZoomISO version 2, a sandbox where those of us want to play can go in and play?
You mean over in office hours?
Well, in office hours, they set up that breakout room that we can, raise our hand literally and figuratively, and then go in and play for a while using ZoomISO. Is there an analog that could be made available for Dante?
Go ahead.
Well, I actually wonder if that very same room could be used that way, because one of the outputs, you have advanced audio options through ZoomISO. You could send those through Dante. Just a thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I have a related question. How is office hours doing that room? I mean, it's not just a video.
There's 12 OBS machines.
Really?
Yes.
Synchronized to start time, so they all start.
Holy mackerel!
Right. JJ figured out how to do that and set it up, and now it's just
unreal.
What's really bad, David, is if you spend too much time in there, you can repeat everyone's part.
Right. Right. Is that what they were using for at IBC, excuse me? In the was that?
Yes, they did.
It
yes,
was.
They did.
Yeah. That's just amazing. Just amazing. Yeah.
And it's funny because when they close the breakout rooms to reconfigure them, all those ISO computers pop back into the main room for a few minutes till they get pushed back into the new breakout rooms.
Yeah.
That's great. And Muddy, you like the new language, the original sound for musicians, Zoom optimized audio?
Yeah, I've noticed in the new update, there's actually two things. There's the naming, but actually when you choose one or the other, you have a different set of sub options that come up for that. And I kind of like that as well, because it makes it more clear that if you choose original sound for musicians, you are not choosing the background level, the what level of background detection or echo cancellation to use. But if you're using Zoom optimized, then you do have those kind of gradations.
The thing I miss, however, is it doesn't remember it. It used for a while there. It used to remember your setting based upon your input device. Right. And so if I'm like, now I'm using a mic, that's fine. I have original sound off because you don't want to hear my air conditioner. But if I switch to the input device being Mimo Live, then I better turn original sound on. Otherwise, the stuff I'm sending through Mimo Live, the music, all those types of things get crushed.
You're right. So that's not there anymore, is it?
Right. That isn't there anymore. And so if you go into your Zoom settings now, this is what you were referring to before. You've got the little toggle here, Zoom optimized audio or original sound. And depending on what you choose, you get different options here. Another thing that I've noticed is that if you don't choose original sound for musicians, you don't have an easy way to turn that on from within the meeting. So
Correct.
So if I have this original sound for musicians turn on, I can in the meeting toggle it off relatively easily. I have the option. And it actually says here, it says displays in-meeting toggle to switch between Zoom optimized audio and original sound for musicians. But if you choose this guy, you don't actually have that option. And as Peter just mentioned, the other thing that you're missing is being able to say, every time I use X input, X microphone, I want optimized original audio for that. Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, I don't know the reason for it, but it appears that is a platform issue, because on Windows, I still have it. I can still select the interface.
Interesting.
So it might just be on the Mac.
Interesting.
How does the AI know that you're a musician? I mean,
Probably frequency. I would get the frequency range.
Like, no, I mean, like, does that mean you have because it's going to turn on original sound, right? For you?
Well, it doesn't turn it on. I just got a pop-up that said
it asks you. Yeah. So, but I mean, do you have to play music for it to know, oh, that's music?
Oh,
and then I'll ask you the question.
It sees all the guitars in the background.
Yeah, I know David said that.
I was going to say, actually going to say, like, the things that come out of my mouth. Oh, Andy Lipnick must be really stupid. He must be a musician. You know, I mean,
no. So
that's incredible.
It popped up during the pre-roll when I had video music playing.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's just, that's what I thought. It's just listening for music and that sort of thing. Yeah.
I think their noise gate tamps down everything outside of the human vocal range as a default. So when it hears music now, it's prompting you to say, wait, are you a musician? Because I'm tamping you down as a default.
Although for what it's worth, I'll just say that when I was playing that video, I did not have original audio on. It was just, but I had my settings over here in Zoom as for background noise suppression to set to low. I found that if your noise suppression is set to low, if you're an audiophile, you would probably still be annoyed by it, but the audio still comes through very nicely. It doesn't tamp it down too much.
Yeah, it's a good feature because I know, like, early in the pandemic, when a lot of people were giving lessons over Zoom, they'd forget to turn that off. They'd forget to turn off that, they wouldn't enable original sound, and they just didn't know about those things, or if they did, they weren't exactly sure how they worked. And now it's really good that they're really paying attention to this stuff.
We use a lot of virtual cables and virtual mics on our production stuff, and you have to turn the original sound on for those to work properly. Otherwise, the sound is just distorted, cut off, clipped.
When you say virtual cables, are you meaning like through loopback or something like that?
No, virtual cables are like it's like a logical cable that you can connect one app with another on the same device. So
it's the equivalent on Windows for audio hijack.
Okay, gotcha. Hey, look who's back, Jeff.
Jeff's back.
Jeff, how'd the build out go?
Yeah, everything's good to go. So they're just working on some pre-record, so I get a little break again. I thought I'd pop back in. And I was listening on YouTube for a little bit and on this original sound, and I thought I've never really kind of checked this out. But what if I was doing, because a lot of us do records, what if I was doing a local record and we needed original sound to be on, but I wanted a clean output? Is there a way to have original sound on, which basically means suppression off, without seeing that button?
What do you mean by a clean output?
Clean video output for the record.
Oh, clean video out. Okay, not audio. Yeah.
I don't know the answer to it, but I mean, we've all haunted sometime or another by, indication status icons and so forth. And so I didn't know if there was a way to have original sound on, which is suppression off. I know you can do the other check boxes, but one of those check boxes by itself doesn't turn suppression off. That's what happens, as I understand it, when you check the original sound for musicians box. But that also makes it visible on screen. So I'd have to test it out and see. Can I have original sound on and get a clean output without recording that button that's showing?
Are you talking about using ISO? Because ISO will give you a clean.
No. I mean, ISO might have to become the tool, right?
So are you just talking about screen scraping?
I'm just saying, like Zoom, cloud or local record.
Right. Gotcha.
Does that record though? Because I don't know that it would.
Anyways, that's just a thought.
We got a poor connection, Jeff.
Yeah, I don't know. For sure. It may not, but that's because I'm out in rural America. I'll be right back.
And I wonder if the local recording might be able to handle that, provided that you didn't need it live.
Yeah, I think that's what Tamara was saying, that the local record may not pick up that debris on the screen, whereas a screen scrape actually would show that, because you're capturing the whole screen. The other thing that occurs to me, in dual screen mode, if you pin to the second screen, that's a clean feed for the most part.
And streaming as well. Streaming is clean, minus the Zoom bug.
Yeah.
On the second monitor, I do have the green badge in the top still, so that's still there. And the names at the bottom, but the names are par for the course. So it's not 100% clean, but it's
on Mac. On Windows, we don't have the green.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Wow, it's so interesting, the differences between on the platforms.
Well, you should be able to turn the names off too, as long as you don't move your mouse over the application.
Right. I have it set to always have them on, because I can't remember anyone's name.
This sounds like a feature request. So.
Yeah, so I've got yours, David. I've got yours pinned to my second screen, and we're not seeing that on Windows.
I wanted to mention one other thing about ZoomISO as a jet flies over, because we have Fleet Week going on in San Francisco. And this came up during Mad in the Kitchen that I was doing with Sky. Is these are people in their kitchen cooking, the various participants. And as the audio person for that show, I was like, okay, I've got to now start experimenting with these settings, because I want to hear them frying. I want to hear this stuff. And then they turn on their fan high, and I'm like, no, I need it on. And for that show, we were, I had a Yamaha QL1, and we were using Dugan. This was in Alex's facility at 090. So we had a lot of tools at our disposal. And in fact, in the console, there is a tool that acts like the noise suppression in Zoom. It's called the Primary Source Enhancer. It's made by Neve. It's a great plugin. It comes with the console. And sometimes because I can turn that up. It's adjustable. But I always wanted to start with them having original sound on. I hate that. Turning, yeah. That's what they used to do back then, remember? Before they changed it. So, but the problem was sometimes the timelines didn't work out, and we'd had to like fix their lighting and video and all these other things. And maybe we'd get to that with them. Maybe we wouldn't on the setup days and all that sort of stuff. But it was really great when we could optimize that audio and you would hear the frying of the onions or whatever.
Well, being one of the cooks on that, our fear was, my wife and I, when we cooked, keeping it a clean show. But it was a challenge, because when we had to chop something or turn on a blender or turn the fan on the stove, we just killed it. And well, but on that show, John, I had a fader for you. So that was the good thing. For that show, if someone was too loud and they weren't talking because they were cooking, I could just turn their fader down, and that's what made it all right. But that's on a show where we had a separate video operator, a separate audio operator, we had a separate director, we had all these separate people. You weren't a one person, operator trying to do everything.
I thought what was amazing, to John's point, is when Madeline on live TV pulled out a hot dish out of the oven without her gloves on.
Oh, I remember that.
And she still kept it a clean show. It's like unbelievable.
She's a pro. She's a pro.
But it does point out the comment that was made when Jonathan was here, is that for those of us who are not trying to do like a show you just said, which has audio, video, separate people managing that stuff, is don't try and do isolated audio. Let Zoom handle it if you can, because otherwise, because I've tried it, Andy, and I know you do it for a living. I'm a rank amateur. I was trying to do it, and I just couldn't keep it straight in my head.
Well, I mean, for me, it's triage. It's like, what's the thing you have to fix first when you have just a few moments with these people, and it just goes down the line. And as long as you can hear them, right? If you can hear them, great. Mic is working, and then maybe the video person's like, move your camera. Can you turn this light on? Like it just goes down the list. And then it's somewhere towards the middle and the bottom is like, oh, can you turn on isolated? Turn on your. Well,
I was trying to figure out the logic behind mix minus. So I was just with 5 different people.
And that all depends on your system. That's the beauty of Zoom. Just doing it all in Zoom is that it takes care of all that for you. And I still do corporate shows, where we have. I have a large mixing console in front of me, and we could separate all these individual people out in different Zoom rooms. They still want to do it through one Zoom because it makes everybody's life easier. Let Zoom manage all of that. And then, they'll even do things where they don't want to pin people because maybe they don't have an operator to do that. They'll let Zoom do that. And it makes sense in those situations, and it takes the stress off the production crew. because then they can concentrate on other things.
Do you think there will come a time when, because Zoom does this so well, but it's a hard problem, especially the audio piece. To me, it's just do you think there will come a time when Zoom will do it so well using AI and their own technologies that we won't need to worry as much about Dugan auto mixing and ISOing out audio and things like that?
I think about my livelihood all the time with regards to artificial intelligence and audio. And I think, I even posed this to someone at Apple because at one point I was applying for a job there. But yeah, I think that where we're at with it now is very good. And, you know, you don't always need an operator if it's a very simple Zoom production, right? You know, and, you know, I'm usually hired because there's a PA system and we're doing Zoom and all that. And I also get hired because the level that they want someone in that chair. But to your point is it's only going to get better. And I think there'll always be levels of production where you need people to operate that particular thing. I don't think it's ever going to get so perfect in my lifetime that, you know, that you won't have that. I think what will happen though is that some of these simpler shows where they have a few people involved, yeah, it may be that, you know, you don't need the audio person, but you still need someone to manage graphics because you're dealing with human beings handing you a file that, you know, needs to be managed. You know, with audio, it may even just be, if it's a semi-live or a hybrid event, it's just a person putting a lav mic on someone and testing it. And then maybe the system can handle the auto mixing. But then there are also things where when you do that, you lose flexibility, you lose spontaneity, you lose the ability to punt if you have to. You know, all those things go kind of out the window, and the AI stuff is not going to be smart enough to know, oh, they've changed their mind about something now in this list of cues.
Yeah, there's circumstances, there's timing. I mean, AI can't possibly know whether you should be able to be heard or not. Like I'm going to mute you. Well, how could AI possibly know that you shouldn't be unmuted? You know, there's that. There's the timing of, you know, like we all commonly have our emergency speaker faints, instantly cut to this, you know, things like that. And I mean, just live is live. AI is never going to be able to fill all that. But I mean, the good news is we should be able to do our jobs even better because AI is doing, you know, I mean, and their noise suppression and echo cancellation has over the last year or two. I just did this the other night. I was on a Zoom with Ray Harwood. I had my speakers in my office on and my microphone in front of my mouth is all, and no headsets, no earbuds. And I never was able to do that before. And there was nothing coming through to him, and it was amazing. And so, you know, they've done an incredible job, and it like you said, it continues to just get better. And so if that's something we don't have to worry about, and even plucking somebody out, like, you know, you call in Andy on this meeting and I'm going to put you into that meeting. That's so much easier. The built-in mixed minus on a separate computer. I'll host your speaker meeting on a separate computer. I HDMI out. I pin you to the second screen. I HDMI out into my input on that machine, and I just do an audio cable back in as the microphone to you so you can hear them. Because the mix, as long as it's out of the same machine and into the same machine, the mix minus is just completely automatic. It's fascinating.
The one thing I just would add to hopefully wrap this up, because I got to get rolling, is that I do get people asking me, like, when they see Dugan, that they know I'm using Dugan, is like, well, why do you still need to mix these microphones? And the answer to that is that Dugan is just a tool. It helps me. Before there was Dugan, I'd have all my fingers on the faders for multiple mics, and I'd do what Dugan was doing manually. Now Dugan can do it quicker than I can. It's just better at it than it's better than a human for doing those dips so that you get nice, clean audio and you don't hear this echoey room where you have all these mics up at full. So it's just helping me do that, which allows me to do other things. So I think with AI, it'll continue to be that. It'll continue to be an assistive tool and not a replacement for a human being. That may change in 100 years or 50 years or whatever, but I'm just saying for the near term, that's what I think.
I just want to jump in real quick because Andy messaged me that he had to go be with his family. I said, family always first. We're so grateful. So just thank you to Andy publicly.
And the other Andy says goodbye and thank you. This was so informative. I can't
so grateful that you were here, Andy. So grateful.
Yeah,
Robert,
thanks for having me. Yeah,
Robert, what's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that when Sam Kokaika was here recently, he talked about another use case with mics, and that is audience mics, to bring in at a hybrid the effect that there are people there and it's not just an empty room, which is sort of also a human decision to bring that sound in.
So I will raise my hands to that big time before I leave. When I've had audience mics, the production leads always say, the person doing the record said it sounded great because we never went to dead air. And that is super important. I got to say, it really does make everything more intimate. I couldn't agree with you more.
I'll tell you something. We just finished the Jewish high holidays. And so I was producing our online stream for the temple that I'm at. And there were 2 leaders and 200, 400 people. And when the leaders weren't making any noise, it was silent.
Yeah.
And and that's not the experience that you want to give. But as soon as you start adding ambient mics, that again kicks up the level of everything.
I want to get my temple to up their. They need to up their online game too. It's the 2 cameras with the joystick going like it's terrible. Anyway, that's another story. See you guys.
See you. David, that's the well-known awkward pause type situation, with the silence. By the way, David, can you just talk to us for a minute about why your audio is not in sync with your video?
You want me to explain why something's broken? I have no idea. Is it new or has it been going on the whole time?
Since the beginning of this session.
Oh, well, I'm glad someone told me. Thanks for letting me look like an idiot the entire time.
It's not too far off.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I was going to say it's off, not by much.
I guess.
If you were to delay your audio about, 60 to 80 milliseconds, it would probably be right in there.
All right. So right now I've got a delay of 4 frames on it.
Yeah.
You mean delay it more?
Yeah. Delay your audio.
Yeah.
Yeah. Delay your audio another like 2 or 3 frames.
All right. Now I'm up to 7. We'll see if that gets any better. Yeah. Part of, one of the reasons I'm so interested in the work that Andy and the whole team is doing is because I'm not a production professional. I am the guy who's just using it for meetings and things like that. And I have a lot of stuff on my desk that I don't know how it works. And so when someone says, why are you out of sync? I don't know how to fix that. And I think that I'm probably representative of 99.999% of the folks using Zoom. And so the fact that their audio system is so good at what it does, and that it switches the view, the speaker automatically is pretty good at doing that. That's really important for Zoom's bigger picture, is having all of these things just work. It's great that we're taking it to its extremes and that we're pushing it. But just making sure.
What really blows me away is if I would be holding my phone up in the meeting right now, listening to you, David, and I was in your office listening to you, the amount of latency between the two is incredibly, it's so low for a cloud-based solution to go up from you to their cloud, do all this processing, and back down to me or any other attendee in the lowest amount of time. It's just impressive.
Yep. And to that point as well, David, I think what these communities, Zoom Test Kitchen, Office Hours, etc., are doing are pushing the envelope and feeding that back into Zoom, and they're improving the product, and then we keep pushing it. So it's a perpetual improvement and iterative process that's pretty awesome to be a part of.
I would agree.
Agreed. Hey, I just want to Muddy, yeah. I'm just want to sort of acknowledge your so I have an ISO machine in here also, and I'm also not seeing all the participants in the companion build. I am on the latest companion build of the latest beta of companion. So I wonder if something's broken in there. Maybe I should go back to a stable build, but I'm also
so does the confirm for me, does the latest ISO participants list show all participants even if their video is off?
No, it doesn't. Well, so I'm looking at the gallery view.
Yeah.
And let me see here. So there
should be 8 of us in the gallery view.
Yeah, and I have 3 in my list view, and I've got 2 in my gallery view.
Well, and thinking about it from a Zoom tech standpoint, you want everyone in the meeting to show up on the buttons, and then the colors of those buttons provide feedback for their status. If they're like those that are unmuted are showing as red, and but I would want everybody showing even if they weren't on camera.
Hang on, I'm curious because as host I have the show non-video participants disabled. So if I enable that and you refresh on ISO, does that make any impact?
No, because I'm not even seeing all of the video on, folks.
Yeah, that's a good question. I just toggled that, and let me see if I can do this.
Now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. There's definitely something wonky going on here because, for example, I've got gallery position 1 is not showing up, but I've got 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 showing up.
You think it's a funny behavior between co-host and host?
I don't think so, because when I'm experiencing this now as a participant. When I was in the ZoomISO test room on office hours, I was seeing it there. I've done a bunch of testing on my own as host and co-host, and I'm not seeing it. So I'm on a recent beta build because Zoom released some updates to their module. So I went into the betas and just following the advice, just kind of went back far enough to capture theirs, but not the stuff before it in case that introduced anything. So anyway, something's a little screwy.
The other thing I've been watching, which is entirely different, is we were just talking about the differences between the Windows client and the Mac client, and Josh made the comment he's still on 5.11. And of course, those of us on Mac are probably on 5.12. 5.12 of the iOS client still hasn't made it through Apple's process yet. So it has its own behavioral quirks that are different.
Yep. And I'll add to that too, because I know in the Zoom Room arena with different platforms, Neat, D10, Poly, etc. Each one of those manufacturers has their own release cycle as well. So there's,
Yeah, Peter, I just wanted to mention, come from the Windows world, I'm on 5.12 and have been on it ever since it was released.
Yeah, I imagine because they don't get, neither Windows nor Mac get in the way. I'm just simply saying Josh isn't there yet, which is why he was seeing the difference in the original sound thing. Josh isn't there. He's on 5.11. But it made me check my phone and my iPad again, and we still haven't seen the updated client make it through the Mac App Store or the iOS App Store, I should say.
Yeah, and just for everybody's sake, I don't know if anybody uses Linux or not, but 5.12 is also on Linux as well.
Yeah.
and then there's one other layer to that onion too, is the preference on the back end to say I want the aggressive updates, or I want to lay back a little bit more. So yeah.
Yep.
Can someone just tell me what John Idelson is driving in, for goodness sakes?
A Sopwith Camel, I think. No.
It's a electric motorcycle, basically, called a fun utility vehicle. And it's made by somebody called Arcamoto, if you want to check it out.
Oh, I've heard of those, actually.
I thought he was paragliding, so I know.
Well, the Sopwith Camel is going to fly by momentarily. Is that what you're trying to say?
So I just
listen, I miss you guys. I didn't want to miss it, so I had to come on.
Thank you, John.
I just downloaded the latest companion build, the latest beta build, just to see if that makes a difference. And it does not. So
I need to get ready to boogie. And
yeah, you know what? It's 5:05. It's 5:05. So let's call it a day. This was fantastic, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here, and everyone for watching and participating with your questions. And so grateful to Andy and to Jonathan and to everyone. So we will see you next week on the Zoom Test Kitchen. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Great job hosting, David.
Thank you, David.
Thanks. See you later.